The question in this first panel is what is the Collide International Award and how artists and scientists meet in the abstract field, which is, as we know, fundamental research and fundamental physics. So let me give you a brief introduction to this program. In 2011, the Cern director at the time, Rolf Hauer, former Director Generale, presently is Fabiola Gianotti, said something while launching the first Cern cultural policy. He said, "The arts and science are inextricably linked. Both are ways of exploring our existence, what is to be human, and what is our place in the universe." And he later commented and emphasized that arts and science are linked. Both are about creativity. Both require technical mastery, and both are about exploring the limits of human potential. So those are the roots of the Collide International program. In 2011, a big experiment started in the largest laboratory in the world, in a world that is science-driven, is focusing on finding things out of nature and exploring new questions to discover even more, if we can, of the little percentage of the information and the understanding we have about our universe and about nature. At that moment, in 2011, there was a realization as well. The labs were worldwide opening to the visitors, to visitors that were eager to know about what was science and what physicists, engineers, and in other labs, any other kind of scientists were doing inside these walls, behind the walls where knowledge was created. So at that time as well, there was the realization, and I think you are part of these conversations and have been for many years, artists wanted to be invited, spend time, and become part of the researchers. Rolf Hauer at the time had this vision together with all the community of Cern to set up a precedent in creating an institutional framework for art and science happening. Today, we've been developing programs inviting a minimum of 12 artists per year, sometimes more. I think the maximum was 35. But we keep expanding the horizons of experimentation, because we are convinced that there are still many things to talk about art and science interactions. In fact, every artist that comes to see us and to spend time exploring the massive diversity of the lab, there is a new question and a new setup on the art and science conversations. And I think this is why Broken Symmetries exist. This is the reason why, after 3 years of collaboration with FACT Liverpool, we have an exhibition of diverse setup of art projects that are giving us more questions, more ways to look at things that are still really difficult to grasp, and are looking for language, for hints. They are interrogating things like neutrinos through immersive experiences and esoteric languages and realms, and as well, there are many places to discover. The context of Cern is, as I say, very diverse, and it has many ways to be explored. But the community of researchers is really open to question as well how these exchanges can be taking place. When the program started, there was also this realization that we could not do it together, on our own. That the laboratory didn't have at the time cultural services. I think we cannot compare ourselves with a cultural institution. It's still a highly scientific place. And so we need to export our expertise and tied our efforts with leading cultural institutions like FACT Liverpool. In 2016 and until now, we've been running different strategies to offer artists from all over the world the opportunity to spend time at Cern and then coming to Liverpool and do work locally and with the team of the institution. And this allows us also to think of the idea of Cern like a network, a place where the community is in transit, that there are many laboratories in the world that can be taking our model, and there are many ways the artists can connect and find synergies with other cities and other locations, and this is a clear example. In Liverpool, it has been many activities around the program that that was the goal of the collaboration with FACT in Liverpool. So this is a not so brief introduction to the Collide International program, but allow me to introduce you and the amazing artists that I'm sharing the panel with. Yunchul Kim was with us in 2016.
Yes.
And but you keep coming. Speaking. And Yunchul Kim is the recipient of Collide International Award in 2016. After 2 months here, Yunchul came to Liverpool to keep developing the ideas set up in the residency. Yunchul is an artist and electroacoustic music composer and founder of Studio Locus Solus in Seoul. Having taught in several academic institutions, Kim was main researcher of the group Matter Reality at the Transdisciplinary Research Program of KIAS, Korean Institute for Advanced Study. And he is a member of the transdisciplinary groups Fluid Skies and Liquid Things that deal with art and science approaches through materiality. And Liquid Things is based in the School of Arts in Vienna. Kim's work focuses on research about new materiality and the artistic potential of fluid dynamics and metamaterials, which are synthetic composite of materials that exhibit properties not usually found in nature, in natural materials. Your work cascade in the show reflects on that, and that's experiences and knowledge that you found at Cern. Leah Porsager is coming from Copenhagen, right? Is graduated from the Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts and the Stadler, I don't know how to pronounce that, in Frankfurt. She is currently developing a PhD research in Malmö Art Academy and Lund University. And as you will see in her work in the show, Leah's practice interweaves fabulation and the speculation with a variety of mediums and looks for alternative ways to think about science, facts, and some of the strategies used are notions of politics, feminism, esotericism, spirituality, and others. Leah was honorary mention last year for Collide International Award. Yu-Chen Wang is based in London. In her work, elaborates and comes back to biographical visions that combines your experience from your Taiwanese origin with a London-based career. Yu-Chen's central practice is drawing, allowing her to explore and meditate on mechanical and biological forms and the ways in which the bodily borderlines blur and mutate. Yu-Chen, as well as Leah, was awarded honorary mention in Collide International last year, and you spent some time with us last summer. Your work has a long title, but it says so much about the work is done at Cern. And this named, I'm going to say it, we aren't able to prove that just yet, but we know it's out there. So it's a way to set expectations and reflect on the intentions behind scientific research. So I'm going to run this panel by doing a simple, I think, exercise, which is I'm going to give us some questions, very general questions, that I hope it triggers a conversation, and it might describe a little the work that is in the show. So, you will find yourself in these questions, I think. So we've been, for the last decade, even more than that, talking about how artists and scientists are observers of the world. And this is obviously one of the reasons, one of the motivations for artists to knock on the lab's doors once we saw the opportunity, right? This openness of research and investigation spaces. So these places are still highly specialized, and when you find places that have an amazing set of technologies, but still they are beyond human scale, how can you react with your artistic strategies? Let me frame it in other way. Cern is one of these places. It's abstract in the notions. It's almost difficult to reach with the normal language, the regular language, but the technologies are highly overwhelming sometimes because they are the most complex and precise technologies in the world, I would say. So how can you react with your artistic practice into this environment, in your experience?
Should I start? Yeah. It was back in May, my first visit, and I really have to say it's more like, I don't know, it's like swimming in the ocean, and you don't know which direction to go for and where is the shore, and if I'm sort of, it just kind of lost the orientation of where I was, I guess. But I guess that was the very beginning, and then visit again. Again, it's that kind of feeling of like, wow. What do I? Where am I? And how do I take all this in? Imagine you're in this place. You can't physically walk from places to places. You literally have to be kind of jump in a car, or you see a lot of physicists will be on the bikes and going around to places. I guess that sort of sense of orientation is physical and also psychological. So it's like kind of work on the both levels. What I found it most interesting was having that a very important breakthrough with Dr. Mike Holden, who's sitting in presence. So he gave me a 6 hours intensive physics lecture. And after trying hard to understand the theory of everything, almost, and realized it's impossible to understand everything. And once I have accepted the fact that I cannot understand it all, it was all clear. Just accept it. I can't. I just cannot with my very limited knowledge. And that's that whole thing. Like my title, it's out there, but what it is, we don't even know what it is. And who set the boundary and where is the boundary? And so once I kind of overcome that fear of not able to deal with the concept of abstraction, once I sort of overcome that, it's all fine. It's all good. Yeah. So I guess that's the very important breakthrough. And then I begin to kind of really thinking about what got me interested in the first place. It's very much from my sort of perspective, I suppose. And once I kind of return to that, just to kind of think what got me interested in the first place, like in particular certain machines at Cern, for example, or the architectures, the very specific 60s or 50s building, or the mountains around, the clouds, or the specific physicists I spoke to, that kind of almost individual characters. And that's sort of various threads I begin to sort of pieces them together. And then obviously is the archive from Cern, looking at how I deal with the old images, but using my knowledge how I interpret these images, and then sort of confirm with all these ideas to the physicist. I remember when to see Professor John Butterworth in UCL, I was showing him, look, I found this picture, the bubble chamber images, they're so interesting. And he told me, but they're not very useful. And I was like, no, they are really interesting. I can prove to you they are super interesting. And so then I came to Liverpool. I spoke to Professor Tara Shears, and I spoke to Mike Holden. And it was just, okay, yeah, so, yeah, Professor Butterworth was right. So I went back to him and said, yeah, you were right. They are really not that useful anymore. But I felt that it was quite important to have my personal sort of experience going through that journey of dealing with my own sort of curiosity or not able to understand things, but I have to go through all these different sort of layers of figuring things out myself. And I think once I've gone through that journey, I don't think I have a problem continuing exploring, I suppose. And I think that was quite important. Yeah. Which is from very personal, sort of experience-led, I suppose. Yeah.
So, Leah, is there anything significantly different from your experience to be next to this research center?
I guess for me it was also a way, I had a little bit the same experience of just being loaded with so much information with this visit. But then I kind of very early on knew that I wanted to find an object that I could also use as this kind of a way to situate the whatever experiment that I wanted to do. And when we found out that I could get the neutrino horn out, I kind of knew, okay, then I have like a horn, and it's super beautiful, and it's this focusing device, and it helped me to get into this kind of neutrino imagination. And then from there I could then use the methods that I knew better, which is I've for a long time worked with like Kundalini technology, so it's a very different technology, but they actually also use like words like quantum technology within Kundalini yoga, and I thought that's a nice and weird match, because of course they don't use it in a scientific way precisely. They make some kind of they transform it into a language that they can use to the yoga, so to speak. And I was interested in trying to put together fields that doesn't normally belong together. And I think that comes or goes back. For me, I did a memorial for the tsunami, and there I made a gravitational wave in Earth outside Stockholm. And it was also a way to transform like a scientific image into something that suddenly becomes like a way to transform an earthly wave into something that bends time-space, which is just like a completely different thing. But again, there I met really interesting scientists, because I met these Nobel Prize winners, and then it was just amazing to hear them talk about the work, the artwork, and how they could relate to it somehow, or relate to this this process of discovering or trying to create something and explore something. And with the work here, of course, it's much more speculative. It's I really try to put things together that I think most scientists would think, oh my God, what is she doing? And I kind of thought, okay, that's fine. But it's also a more honest place, because I'm not a scientist. I'm an artist, and what I can bring into this field is maybe this, I would say, more disturbing. Trying to create this image, which is maybe a bit of everything, because it combines different fields in a new way, and then maybe it creates a new perspective. We don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely creates a new knowledge in a way through the experience. What about you, Yunchul? Do you think that there was something in the framework of the laboratory that affect your work?
Yes, sure. Because so I was really surprised to meet so different art scientists. Also, so my interest or to be there, I would like to meet scientists, or also understand how they solve the problems. But I met a lot of scientists there. Also, Helga Timko was my scientific partner, and I visited what she was doing. So I never heard about the beam dynamics or cavity and radio cavity and so on. But my interest is first trying is living in science institution. I really tried 2 months, live in campus in Essen. It was for me really not easy. First 2 weeks, I really couldn't coordinate or also where I am. Also, I couldn't make art because it is totally new world. Therefore, also I don't have any studio really to make so handwork. Therefore, I start to decide. Okay, then I will try to meet a lot of scientists and also to want to talk with them how they get the inspiration or how they can imagine the world or nature or something. Then I found it is very interesting common point, because so if you get as an artist, if I get some inspiration, it is not sometimes good because it produces new problems, because you really survive with this idea to realize it. And still, maybe you see my exhibition, new piece here, you really fight with the nature, because nature is beautiful, but they don't want to follow what I imagine. Then this kind of my problem is totally same. I meet some engineer at Cern. They really problem with because of really I don't know 0003 numbers. I don't know how big it is, but they talk about so small world and also big energies. Therefore, this kind of jumping with imagination and reality, and also this kind of scientific method, how can they going on with step with these problems and ideas? Then that was for me really touched, because I'm living with these problems. Then, therefore, it was first very important experience with its son. Also, the second one is really exciting to visit Sun Institute. There, how they make superconductive cables and big electromagnet field generator and so on. Then, I can a little bit understand because I'm working with this kind of material. Therefore, I visit this institution, then I have an opportunity to really meet this engineer or scientist. They explained why they need this also, how can bending the beams and so on. Then, yeah, it gives also a lot of knowledge for artists and so on. Yeah, it was a very great time for me. Mm.
It's very interesting to listen to you while you talk, because I realize that it's very abstract, and it might be very abstract for the audience to understand what we are talking about when you say superconducting magnets, calibration, radio cavity, things like that, everything, all the secrets of each community is the language, right? And I think this is one of the frontiers or the barriers that you need to go through while you are in a scientific lab to find yourself and your own practice outside your control environment of your studio or your community. So my next question is about these conditions. You are out there in a laboratory in Geneva, not even in Geneva. It's in between France and Switzerland, and could be anywhere else. A laboratory of fundamental research of a science that you will never be taught in the school, particle physics. So, in your opinion and in your experience, what are the conditions for the future interactions between artists and scientists, or in a context of this kind? Because it's obvious that this is going to be happening more and more often in the next few years. So in your opinion, briefly, what are the conditions that you say, this is what I would need?
So I should think about the question.
Thinking.
So maybe,
That's a big question. I don't know.
More neutrino horns.
More neutrino horns and everything will be fine. No, I guess that there is something. There's something about being introduced by these different, of course, all the different experiments that you can have an introduction to at Cern, and also the different scientists. It kind of opens up your just your imagination, and I guess that's just it's really helpful for everybody to just open up your mind a little bit, because as I experienced it, I mean, I've been introduced to many weird things, but this science is just even more weird, and I love that. I think that it's just really amazing that one of these places where you get a lot of funding and it's very serious, and then still they have a goal to kind of, we want to reach what we cannot really imagine. And so it is really a level of abstraction that I think the art world could sometimes use to just see this focus, and also to just to dare to do these experiments, and then sometimes it will be a collapse and sometimes it will not work, and it's fine. I mean, you need to go there, you need to go out there and dare to take these risks, and I think that's what I was very inspired by, and I think the art world would maybe be, instead of I mean, sometimes I have a feeling that the art world just need a little help with the not being scared of walking out where you don't know exactly where it will end, and so maybe you should have it for like museums should go and see Cern. I don't know.
Let me go to another question, because I know we have very little time left. But it's very related to what you just said. Is So we are talking all the time about producing knowledge and creating meaningful experiences. So how can we meaningfully connect with the challenges of today's world through these experiences of art and science research? Because you just said that the art needs to be shaken a bit and be taken in other spaces and find another places for engagement, right? Abstract or material. So how these meaningful exchanges might be helping to look at the edge of our knowledge and engagement with planetary concerns or climate change or things that we know are urgent.
I think this whole experience, I felt like I learned the most is not about science itself. I mean, there's a lot of knowledge that I have gained so far, but it's more about how scientists do science, how they operate and how they work together in sort of different, like the theoreticians or experimentalists or the engineers and or even people simply just putting things together. So there's so many different level of collaborations and so many different level of how people work together or don't work together or agree or disagree. And I think that's something which I found extremely interesting is the people behind science, how this whole sort of ecology, not just the knowledge produced, is the people who actually push to produce all this knowledge. And I heard a few times about like walking on the edge of knowledge. It felt really strange to hear that. But I think what Leah was just saying about the kind of be more daring in terms of really stretch your imagination. And I think that's something which I guess that's the way forward, I suppose.
Okay, I think we need to handle the microphone.
Right, I'll grab this one. So yeah, we've got some time for some Q&A, if anyone's got any questions to ask. Go on, be brave.
This is just to pick up on something that Yunchul said. And I've seen photographs of your studio and like how much equipment you have there and how you normally work, both in Korea and when you're in Berlin. I just wondered how you thought your practice changed being at Cern, because like you have these beautiful sketchbooks filled with very intense drawings and maths and explorations and experimentation, and I just wanted to hear a little bit about how you thought your actual practice changed because of the restrictions of Cern, and whether you thought it was a positive thing or maybe not so much you missed your equipment.
So actually, ambient is changed. My setup is maybe same. My practice is maybe same what I'm doing, but the ambient is changes because I have more scientist friend. Therefore, I can they visit me, and also it's very freely we can talk about everything, also nature, politics, also architecture, culture, and so on. That gives me a lot of power to have a scientist friend. Also, they are very proud to have an artist friend. so therefore, this I learned more at Cern because I have still few scientists still contact, not only because of give us questions, because so if you sometimes people think that if you talk about art and science, then artists make a problem and scientists make a solve. Or a kind of little bit hierarchy that artists always asking and scientists always answer. But I think it must be we start on the same level. It is very important because otherwise, so scientists will get very fast boring. So I think it's very important to really start this relationship in the same levels. Therefore, so we should really learn. If as an artist, if you really collaborate with science, then I really learn a lot of their knowledge. Also to try to understand what they are doing and how they are living. So I think it's very important point to make us, leveling.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, I'll follow on from that if we're still warming up the audience, because the idea of, I think, of Collide is that there's an impact of art and science, and you've clearly demonstrated the effect that being in Cern had on your artistic practice. I just wondered how you thought your artistic practice changed Cern, or has changed Cern. Because presumably it has to work in both directions.
So, for example, in this show, I have two particle detectors. This is the directory I learned at Cern, because at Cern they have they research on project, but they have also some project for the normal public. Then they have some workshop, so build some particle detector in amateur way, or some more little bit semi-professional and so on. Then I have an opportunity to read all archive what they done with the Geiger-Müller count, or so different kind of material to detect radiation and so on. Then I really learned, studied, researched it in my residency at Cern. It is changed my some practice and or give a lot of helpful. Yeah.
Well, at some point I replying to you with a little anecdote. I was talking to a colleague of mine at Cern, and I said, well, Cern is a highly intellectual place. And he said, no, it's a highly scientific place. For me, there was no difference at all. But obviously, it's about the framework, how we frame disciplines. And I think, it's pretty challenging to give this mission to the artist. Hey, change the culture of a lab of 11,000 scientists. But I think slowly there is a contamination in the good way of culture understood and art understood as knowledge inside the lab. And it's another kind of knowledge with a peer-to-peer review system that is very clear, that is happening outside the academia as well, but it's self-regulating. And is understood like that at the lab, thanks to programs. And I think this is only a fruitful exchange, maybe not a big impact, but this is slowly changing and creating enriching relationships between these disciplines.
Any other questions from the floor?
Can you explain a bit more about what you mean by it changed your orientation? Going to Cern, you felt very disorientated, and just is it at an intellectual level or also physical?
So whole levels. Also, if you go to Cern, it's the architecture is really like a labyrinth. You can find you couldn't find where is my office or where is my hotel and so on. But because the history, the building is like a patchwork. They grown up. Therefore, you cannot really. There is no kind of something to orientate. Maybe some Jura Mountain. Then you know a little bit the south and north. And the water tower. Yeah, and water tower. And also, if you go to cafeteria, there are a lot of interesting things going on because so many young scientists and old science, they talk about everything, their research and so on. Then first 2 weeks, I really didn't understand why they talk about this kind of stuff so deeply and so on. But so this kind of new experience gave me first 2 weeks. I really disoriented. How can I going on with the scientists also in campus and so on? Yeah.
Anyone else?
I just wondered whether, Leah, you can answer that as well, because it's an amazing question. particularly with your practice, which is so much about the body and spirituality and location. I just wondered if you could answer like the same question. About how you felt when you were there, like disorientated mentally, spiritually, physically, and how it changed you, because you're very much about the energies. And
yes, of course, my stay was different because we were only there for a much shorter period. So that was also why maybe my approach also needed to be more intense. It's just like, okay, well, how can I make a fast entrance to this building? And that was then to do this like Kundalini meditation, to try to go deeper inside in a different way. But of course, I also went around and I was confused on many levels, because we went through so many places, and also when we were searching for the neutrino horn, we went into like all these stored places that were amazing, and then of course everything was like, oh, you cannot take it because it's like radioactive, and I was just okay, and we just went around, and of course I was just in love with all this concrete, and I kind of felt there was this extremely interesting thing about to measure something so tiny. You need like concrete and metal, and you need so much stuff to detect the smallest possible. And I think that is just such a beautiful image, and I think that's also something talking about what the world needs to understand at the moment, where we have like a climate change and we have all these problems. And I think this these abstractions and how things are connected are just extremely important. So for me, it was more like there was something about science and how I intuitively maybe think that there is that it's important that we need to be more aware of how matter and antimatter, or that's of course a very I use it now as an abstraction, yeah. But just to have like the big sign in front of the antimatter factory is just like, wow! It's a sign. It's real. It's a building, and then it has this. That's actually a factory where they make antimatter, and that's the only place in the world where they do that. It's amazing, it's. There's also something. There's also maybe that's why there's also humor in my work. It's so crazy. It feels like so crazy in a good way. It was very inspiring.
Any final questions?
So you guys particularly were afforded like a glimpse of this place, and the years and years and years of research that go, and engineering, everything goes into it. What would you have done with years and years and years of time to really get into everything of that kind of site, from all the dimensions of knowledge and engineering and everything, rather than just a snapshot? Do you feel would that have been an exciting prospect?
For sure. I mean, in a way, you kind of just feel that you want to go back. Or that's at least my experience. That this was just like, and then okay, now we have an exhibition, and but this will continue, at least in the mind, and I guess that's also enough, because there are many different other places that have the same, like we have many other places with science where it can meet art. It doesn't need necessarily to be Cern, but it's important, because it's like the magnetic whatever center point or something.
I think I could add a little bit about time. Time become a very interesting notion with the time we spend there. Like, because Leo and I, we did our first visit together. The time was so short. And like, we've been taken around to antimatter factory, for instance, and it was like 1 hour. Michael Dozer did not stop a second talking, and we're like, what did you just say? He could just read from our facial expression, knowing that he's not getting anywhere. And so that very intense 1 hour, getting to understand how many years he's been spending on that experiment and how many people have been contribute towards the production of this whole the factory production line, if you like, and you just can't find out equivalent time exchange and to sort of convert that into a quick fix of quick understanding. Then I spend a lot of time in the archive. Then I deal with this sort of 60 years of Cern's development, and then spending time in Liverpool is 125 years of history, and then you start to look back, and then you go back to the Big Bang. So if there's time before the beginning of time, it just never ends. And so what is the time? And it becomes very, very interesting notion. I think, I struggle a lot, but I really felt like it's also very interesting to kind of position myself within almost like different time zone, different universe. Anyway, you get to see a bit of my work. It did talk a great deal about time. Yeah. Time is short.
Talking of which, nice little segue there into ending this panel and moving on to the second panel. But can we just thank all our three artists and Mónica?